The Galactic Empire had issued countless ultimatums across its 1,000 conquered systems, but none had ever been sent to a species like humanity. Their proclamation arrived with theatrical arrogance, projected into every Terran communication grid in a voice bred to command obedience. It promised annihilation if Earth refused immediate submission, framed as a mercy, to prevent unnecessary suffering. The Empire expected the usual reactions: fear, bargaining, or frantic compliance. Instead, the message rippled through Earth and found a response so alien to the Empire's psychology that it struck them harder than any weapon. Humans laughed. The initial laughter came from analysts who had studied the Empire's war doctrine for years. They recognized recycled intimidation tactics, outdated rhetoric, and a fleet formation pattern that had been abandoned by human strategists centuries prior. Their laughter wasn't careless. It was the sound of specialists seeing a threat that didn't match the enemy's claimed invincibility. Civilians joined in, not out of disrespect but genuine disbelief at the Empire's assumption that humanity would simply kneel. The Empire misinterpreted this as madness. In reality, it was humanity's oldest coping mechanism, meeting danger with humor that masked an unspoken readiness for the worst. Empire intelligence drones observed the reaction and misread every signal. They categorized human laughter as cultural denial, emotional instability, or primitive bravado. None of their archives contained a species that responded to existential threats with jokes about the enemy's ship designs or commentary about how the ultimatum sounded like a poorly rehearsed drama broadcast. They flagged humanity as dangerously unpredictable and possibly suicidal. Unpredictability was the one trait the Empire feared, because their dominance relied on opponents behaving logically, under their definition of logic. Behind the public laughter, Earth's leadership met with cold efficiency. There were no theatrics, no panic, no desperation, only a synchronized chain of decisions shaped by decades of silent preparation. Humanity had taken notes on every empire that rose and fell before them. They had no desire to become another conquered species, and they had never been delusional about their position in the galaxy. They knew a confrontation would come eventually. The Empire's ultimatum merely confirmed the timeline. While citizens joked online about imperial fashion choices or mocked their dramatic phrasing, military networks activated protocols written for moments exactly like this. What frightened the Empire even more was the calmness that followed the laughter. There were no evacuation waves, no riots, no surrender campaigns. Instead, human traffic patterns remained stable, factories continued production without interruption, and data streams indicated a population treating the ultimatum as an inconvenience rather than an existential threat. If fear existed, it wasn't paralyzing or outward. It turned inward, compressing into resolve. That subtle shift was something the Empire's sociologists failed to interpret correctly. They saw the absence of panic as delusion. Humanity understood it as discipline. The Empire had always relied on psychological superiority. Their fleets were massive, but their victories often depended on forcing enemies to break before battle even began. When humanity refused to break emotionally, the Empire's foundation trembled. They began to replay the recordings, analyzing the tone of the laughter, the expressions, the relaxed posture of citizens who clearly understood the danger. Each replay deepened their concern. They were accustomed to fear. Laughter was an unknown variable. As the ultimatum's deadline approached, humanity's global networks synchronized into a silent, united front. Governments, corporations, independent colonies, and off-world research stations locked into a shared defense protocol. There were no broadcasts of threats, no declarations of vengeance, no chest-beating bravado. Humanity did not respond with a counter-threat because they didn't need to. Their silence carried more weight than any speech. The Empire's intelligence units interpreted the lack of diplomatic reply as incompetence. Their war strategists, however, sensed something else, a trap. When the Empire extended its final warning, expecting panic to crack the facade, Earth's response arrived not through officials or ambassadors but through an accidental leak from a civilian live stream. A group of workers in an orbital station had replayed the Imperial message, burst into laughter again, and joked casually about whether the Empire wanted them to apologize for not being scared enough. The clip spread faster than the Empire could censor it. Millions saw it. Billions heard it. And the Empire's observers watched as every human reaction aligned into one defiant answer. Humanity wasn't laughing at the threat. Humanity was laughing at the assumption they could be threatened at all. The Empire expected humanity's laughter to fade once the weight of their ultimatum settled. Instead, it grew sharper, more focused, shaped by the strange human instinct to turn fear into fuel. Analysts around the world dissected the Empire's message like a puzzle with missing pieces, noting every inconsistency, every recycled tactic, and every flaw that betrayed outdated doctrine. They didn't overlook the threat. They simply refused to treat it with the reverence the Empire demanded. Their commentary, dry, intelligent, almost amused, began circulating across networks, and the laughter evolved into something the Empire hadn't anticipated: collective confidence. In research stations, scientists examined the Empire's vessel signatures captured from long-range scans. Their engines, once considered the gold standard of galactic propulsion, appeared bulky and inefficient compared to the compact designs humanity had quietly perfected. The Empire didn't know humanity had long surpassed them in hidden corners of technology, innovations born not from conquests but from necessity and relentless curiosity. Engineers joke that the Empire's power cores looked like museum pieces. Not a single one of them dismissed the danger, but none could deny the irony. Humanity had grown beyond the limits the Empire assumed they still had. Among civilians, the reaction followed a different rhythm. Artists, comedians, students, and workers turned the Empire's ultimatum into material for humor, not to trivialize the threat but to strip it of its intended impact. Humor became a shield, a way of telling one another that fear wouldn't guide their choices. Families continued their routines, teachers kept classrooms open, and markets operated without interruption. Even online debates, infamous for spiraling into chaos over trivial topics, united under one sentiment: submission wasn't an option, and surrender wasn't even a consideration. Yet beneath the laughter was a steel thread of preparation. Defense networks tightened their grids, space monitoring arrays shifted into sustained analysis mode, and black site facilities activated silent protocols known only to the highest-ranked strategists. Humanity didn't boast about their readiness. They didn't broadcast threats. They didn't release footage of their arsenal. They did what they always did when facing overwhelming odds: they worked. Quietly. Methodically. With a level of precision the Empire's intelligence systems could not detect. Within the Empire, the reaction grew increasingly paranoid. Their observers, stationed in deep cloak, watched the calm unfolding across Earth's surface and misinterpreted every signal. A species that did not panic was one thing. A species that laughed under threat was another. But a species that laughed while preparing in near-perfect silence? That terrified them. Reports flooded their council chambers. No public unrest, no diplomatic pleas, no requests for negotiation. They found no signs of desperation, only movement patterns suggesting coordination far beyond what most, young species, could achieve. Humanity's military, meanwhile, interpreted the Empire's monitoring efforts with cold clarity. They recognized the subtle gravitational fluctuations of hidden probes and allowed them to record what human command wanted them to see: stability, everyday life, and nothing more. The Empire believed they were gathering intelligence. Humanity let them gather comfort. Every false signal was intentional. Every sensor echo was crafted to shape imperial expectations. Humans weren't just preparing, they were engineering the enemy's perception. As the Empire debated whether to accelerate their timetable, one final development tipped their uncertainty into genuine alarm. A coalition of independent human colonies sent a unified message back to Earth, acknowledging the threat but expressing no fear. These were settlements known for internal disagreements, yet at this moment every faction aligned with Earth without hesitation. The Empire recognized the significance instantly. Unity under threat signaled a species with lethal potential. The laughter that had begun as a spontaneous reaction shifted into something more calculated. It became a message repeated across every human channel. They don't understand us. It wasn't arrogance. It was observation. The Empire saw humor as weakness, but for humans, it was preparation wrapped in satire. It was a way of sharpening morale without theatrics. It was a quiet declaration that no ultimatum, no matter how grand, could break something woven into the species' identity. When the Empire finally concluded humanity wasn't going to beg, panic, or fold, they prepared a demonstration strike, a fleet meant to overwhelm Earth's defenses and force submission. They believed this show of force would extinguish the laughter once and for all. What they didn't know was that humanity had already mapped the fleet's approach vectors, identified its vulnerabilities, and synchronized a response none of the Empire's war simulations accounted for. Humanity wasn't merely amused. Humanity was ready. The Empire's demonstration fleet emerged at the edge of the Sol system with the confidence of conquerors certain of their superiority. Their ships formed a precise, intimidating wall of metal and energy, optimized to overwhelm civilizations that relied on brute force or fear-driven disarray. Imperial commanders believed humanity would freeze at the sight of their arrival. Instead, their long-range scanners detected no disruption in Earth's patterns, no evacuations, no public distress signals, no frantic jumps of civilian vessels. The stillness unsettled them more than resistance would have. In war, silence from an enemy often meant a hidden strike waiting to unfold. Imperial officers initiated the scripted escalation procedure. They projected warnings across space, demanding compliance before they fired a single shot. Their protocols required intimidation before violence. Fear was typically enough to secure surrender. Yet no reply came. Instead of distress, they intercepted civilian chatter so casual it felt surreal. A conversation about routine cargo schedules. A broadcast discussing weather patterns. A group of students debating sports statistics. To the Empire, it was psychological defiance unlike anything they had encountered. They mistook it for arrogance and proceeded with their next step, unaware that humans had allowed every transmission through intentionally. Humanity's defense systems had already shifted into high readiness. Surveillance networks tracked each Imperial vessel with microscopic precision. Every drive pulse, shield modulation, and formation shift was logged, analyzed, and matched against decades of covert intelligence. Humans had studied the Empire long before the Empire acknowledged their planet, and that preparation now crystallized into a single advantage: the element of perfect insight. While the Empire viewed humanity as an underdeveloped species, humanity had already solved the flaws in Imperial technology, noting vulnerabilities the Empire assumed impossible to detect. The first move came when the Empire advanced a vanguard detachment toward Earth's outer defense perimeter. Their plan was simple: disable a few satellites to show dominance without inflicting heavy damage. Before they reached their first target, their vessels encountered a distortion field that bent sensor readings into chaos. Imperial scanning arrays flickered between false distances, misidentified locations, and phantom signatures. They attempted recalibration, only to realize the distortion wasn't random. It was deliberate. Controlled. Tailored to Imperial detection wavelengths. Then the jamming hit. A pulse, silent and clean, severed the Empire's internal communications for a fraction of a second. It was enough to break formation cohesion and trigger cascading alerts. Imperial officers scrambled to restore order, but humanity had already moved to the next phase. Precision beams, thin as fine threads of light, cut through the void and targeted non-critical components of the lead ships. They were disabling shots, not lethal ones, executed with a level of accuracy that stunned even Earth's own commanders. Within moments, several Imperial vessels drifted in confusion, their propulsion arrays offline. The Empire responded with force, firing energy bursts meant to intimidate rather than annihilate. Humanity didn't return fire with equal aggression. They countered with gravity shear projectors, experimental devices never disclosed to any external entity. The shears sliced through space around the incoming shots, dissolving them before they reached human assets. To the Empire, it appeared as if humanity had casually erased their attack. That single moment shattered their perception of technological superiority. The Empire's admiral, desperate to reassert control, attempted to reorganize the fleet. But the psychological advantage had already shifted. Imperial crews, trained to fight predictable enemies, now faced a species that manipulated physics with surgical mastery. They realized humanity hadn't responded impulsively or emotionally. Everything the humans had done, every pulse, every cut, every distortion, was intentional, restrained, and disturbingly efficient. It was the behavior of a power that didn't need to prove its strength because it already understood it. When humanity finally transmitted a single message, it wasn't a threat. It was a quiet advisory. You've tested enough. That simple statement tore through the Empire's morale more effectively than a barrage of weapons. It conveyed confidence without bravado, dominance without hostility, certainty without cruelty. Imperial ships retreated in a fractured arc, abandoning their initial formation as the full scale of their miscalculation settled in. They had expected panic. They found precision. They had expected desperation. They found control. They had expected surrender. They found a species that dismantled their demonstration without revealing even a fraction of its true strength. Humanity hadn't fought to win. Humanity had fought to warn. The Empire retreated from Sol in fractured disarray, but humanity didn't chase them with reckless triumph. Instead, Earth's command councils activated the next phase of a strategy crafted long before the Empire issued its ultimatum. The counterstrike was not designed to humiliate or conquer. It was meant to deliver clarity. Humanity wanted the Empire to understand that the warning they had attempted to impose had been answered with unmistakable precision. No speeches, no theatrics, only action sharp enough to leave a permanent imprint on Imperial doctrine. A single human task group departed from the outer orbital stations, not a grand armada but a compact formation built for mobility and silent assertion. Each vessel carried technology the Empire had never documented: adaptive hull fields, signal-hiding drives, and navigational layers capable of bending transition space in ways the Empire considered theoretical. Humanity didn't announce their departure. They simply slipped into the Imperial border sectors, a movement so quiet that Imperial listening posts detected the disturbance only after the ships had already passed beyond their tracking capabilities. Inside the Empire, the political machinery was in turmoil. Reports from the failed demonstration fleet were fragmented, conflicting, and laced with fear. Captains spoke of weapons they didn't understand, distortions that defied known physics, and a species that wielded restraint with unnerving control. Leadership dismissed some accounts as exaggeration, but the consistency of the fear behind every report couldn't be denied. They prepared defensive formations near key border systems, expecting humanity to descend with the ferocity of a retaliatory conqueror. What arrived was far more alarming. The human task group didn't target populated worlds or military strongholds. They selected a single Imperial relay hub, small, strategically insignificant on paper but vital as a communications bridge between several sectors. The Empire anticipated an overwhelming assault. Instead, the humans executed a surgical operation that unfolded with absolute precision. They emerged from transition space directly behind the relay's defensive screen, bypassing every detection node. Before Imperial crews understood what had happened, their targeting systems froze, command links severed, and shield matrices collapsed without a single shot landing. Human ships didn't fire on the relay. They merely disabled its ability to issue distress calls or defensive responses. Then, with quiet efficiency, they projected a series of encrypted pulses across Imperial channels. It wasn't a threat or a declaration. It was a technical demonstration, data packets showing exactly which vulnerabilities had been exploited, how humanity had bypassed their defenses, and the precise level of restraint they had used. The message was clear without ever being spoken. We have no interest in your destruction. But we will not tolerate aggression. The Empire's leadership received the data stream with growing dread. Every revealed weakness corresponded to systems they believed unbreakable or hidden. The implications were devastating. Humanity had mapped them more thoroughly than any adversary they had faced. Worse, humanity had done so without boasting or broadcasting power. It was the quiet confidence of a species unwilling to posture. The Empire realized too late that their ultimatum hadn't been issued to a subordinate species. It had been issued to a peer, perhaps even a superior. Human commanders reinforced that perception with their final maneuver. They approached the main Imperial relay station, held position just long enough for Imperial sensors to record them, and then departed without engaging. They wanted the Empire to see their ships, analyze their signatures, and understand that humanity was choosing not to escalate. The Empire misinterpreted humanity's laughter as mockery. Now they recognized it as a sign of a species that didn't fear consequences because they had prepared for them long before any confrontation began. By the time the human task group vanished back into transition space, entire Imperial committees were in emergency session. Admirals debated the implications of a species that wielded such calm precision. Governors feared that any attempt at retaliation would provoke a response beyond their capacity to survive. Civilians, exposed to leaked reports, whispered about humanity with a mixture of awe and alarm. Humanity had not struck to destroy or dominate. They had struck to deliver a lesson the Empire would never forget. The humans would not bow, would not break, and would not be reshaped by intimidation. Their silence carried weight. Their restraint carried power. And their counterstrike delivered the truth the Empire had failed to see from the beginning. A species that laughs under threat is not reckless. It is certain. The Imperial High Council convened in a chamber built to project dominance, yet for the first time in its history, the room felt small. Reports from border sectors, fleet captains, intelligence officers, and internal analysts converged into a single, unavoidable truth. Humanity had dismantled an imperial show of force with the composure of a species that never considered defeat a possibility. The Empire had sent a warning they expected to echo across Earth in terror. Instead, the only echo was human laughter replaying across their networks, laughter that now felt like a prophecy. Counselors debated in frantic cycles. Some argued that humanity's silence after their counterstrike was a psychological tactic. Others insisted it was a sign that humanity didn't see the Empire as worth addressing directly. A few attempted to cling to old doctrine, claiming that overwhelming numbers could still secure victory, but their confidence collapsed when tactical advisors laid out the data. Humanity had engaged without deploying its full fleet. They had used only a handful of vessels. They had targeted no civilians, destroyed no infrastructure, and avoided lethal strikes even when they held absolute advantage. That level of restraint was more frightening than open aggression. The Empire realized something their ancestors had once feared but forgotten: a species that fights only when forced is the most dangerous kind. Humanity had not displayed rage, vengeance, or conquest-driven hunger. Their response had been efficient, impersonal, and strategically perfect. They sought no territory, demanded no tribute, and offered no ultimatums in return. They simply refused to kneel. To an empire built on the assumption that fear was universal, this behavior shattered every model they used to predict conflict. While the Council argued, Imperial citizens absorbed the leaked accounts spreading through unofficial channels. What they learned about humans contradicted everything their government had taught them. Humanity's technology wasn't primitive but innovative in ways the Empire hadn't pursued. Their resolve wasn't born from desperation but from unity built over generations of surviving threats far greater than imperial intimidation. And most unsettling of all, their laughter wasn't mockery, it was recognition. Humans had recognized the Empire's tactics as relics. They had treated them with the same amusement one would reserve for an outdated warning that no longer applied. Humanity's final communication arrived not as a transmission of power but as a quiet diplomatic packet sent to the Empire's central node. It contained no demands, accusations, or declarations. It consisted of a single message: "We do not seek conflict, but we will never accept chains." It wasn't grand, poetic, or threatening. It was a plain statement of identity, and it carried more weight than any weapon the Empire possessed. It stripped the Empire of its illusion of superiority and replaced it with a revelation: humanity fought not for dominance, not for glory, but for the right to remain unbroken. Imperial strategists reviewed sensor logs from the encounter, searching for evidence that humanity had stretched its full capabilities. What they found instead was a terrifying pattern: human ships had deliberately held back. Many of their systems operated at reduced power. Their strategic maneuvers showed gaps intentionally left open. Their disabling strikes had been precise to the point of mercy. Humanity had demonstrated only enough force to protect themselves and enough control to show that escalation was a choice, not a necessity. This understanding spread through the Empire like a quiet storm. The populace began questioning the wisdom of provoking a species capable of winning without hatred. Governors sent requests for de-escalation treaties. Admirals who once commanded fear now advised diplomacy. The Empire, accustomed to ruling through intimidation, faced a civilization that couldn't be intimidated at all. The Council finally accepted the truth they had tried to avoid. Further aggression would not just fail, it would guarantee their own collapse. Humanity had no desire to invade, but if pushed, they would respond with the same calculated confidence they had already displayed. The Empire's survival depended on acknowledging the limits of its reach. Envoys were dispatched under strict orders to seek dialogue, not dominance. They carried no threats, only respect forged from a fear they barely concealed. When they reached human space, they found humanity already waiting, calm, composed, offering no triumphal posturing. The humans simply accepted the envoys with the same quiet certainty they had shown throughout the entire ordeal. The Empire had misunderstood the laughter. It wasn't joy. It wasn't disrespect. It was the sound of a species that recognized danger, measured it, and found it lacking. A species that refused to let fear dictate its destiny. A species that had looked at a warning meant to break them and responded with the one answer only the truly unafraid could give.